Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Travis Perkins, Vice President of Customer Experience at Join, where I get to engage with our amazing enterprise and building owner customers, including Boston Properties, who we'll hear from today. Join provides a cloud-connected platform to help improve tenant experience, improve operational efficiencies, and as we'll get into today, helping building owners elevate trust. On our panel today, we have Jim Whalen from Boston Properties, and Jim serves as Senior Vice President and Chief Information and Technology Officer at Boston Properties, where he's responsible for the direction and implementation of technology and applications. He's a recipient of the New York City Urban Fellowship. He's a current trustee and past president of the Boston chapter of the Society for Information Management. And for those of you that don't know, Boston Properties is one of the largest owners, managers, and developers of first-class office properties in the United States, with significant presence in 5 markets, including Boston, Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. Carl May is the co-founder and CEO of Join. Prior to founding Join, Carl was the co-founder and CEO of Trek Labs, which was acquired by Sonus Networks. Carl has been a recognized leader in technology for over 25 years and is the author of several patents on encryption, scrambling, and other cybersecurity-related innovations. Today, we'll be talking to Jim about helping building owners elevate trust and how do we get tenants safely back into the building. Now, be sure to stick around for our live session after Jim and Carl's conversation, where we'll talk about specific applications to help elevate trust, including a demo of our new app up next.
Welcome, Jim. It's good to see you.
Thanks. Yeah, great to see you, Carl. How's it going?
It's going a lot better right now. Obviously, the first couple months of March, April, and probably even part of May, there was a lot of questions about what's going on in the market. I think many people were caught off guard, and that's really kind of where I want to start with. We've been working with you for a while, but I think a lot of the comments that a lot of the conversations we've had with you over the last 6 or 7 months have provided a lot of thought-provoking ideas about how we needed certainly to adjust our approach in the market. What I really want to do was sort of wind the clock back a little bit and say, we're really in this very, very different world. Those who are tuning into this conversation are really interested, I think, in understanding how one of the leading lights in commercial real estate has adjusted and is adjusting, continuing to adjust to, I think what you pointed out to me is the next reality rather than the new reality, the next reality, which is a great line. And I'll just make sure that that is properly trademarked to you. But let's start off really in the early days where there was significant confusion, mid or actually 10th, 11th, 12th of March, people started sheltering in place. They started, they stopped coming to the office. They started spending time working from home. What was really the role that you and other leaders within the commercial real estate community started to think about? What did you chart as a way forward at that time?
So thank you, Carl. Yeah, it was, I think I shared, it was like an exhilarating, exhausting, and intense period of time because we were really kind of running on two paths. So one was I needed to, the enterprise, the company, the platform needed to day one, operate in a remote mode, and that took, we were literally out of the gate with everyone working from home. Didn't lose a heartbeat, but you can just think about all that variability that you needed to settle out in really just your whole workforce working remotely. So that was just one angle, and we could riff on that, but and the second was really immediately as a company. We stood up a health security task force. It was about 40 people across disciplines, and I gotta just kind of say that the culture of our company lent itself to this being created. Really, and again, the intensity and the thoughtfulness and the knowledge that we brought you know, in a very short period of time, because on May 1st, we released, you know, a plan to our customers that was a leading, you know, a thought leading piece for the industry. Um, and we really tackled and debated and found reference points for a lot of these key measures and protocols that literally are standard now, you know, across companies, across platforms, and we rushed to, you know, get them in place in the May timeframe. By June 1st, we had, you know, you know, really to the credit of our leadership. You know, our CEO Owen Thomas and President Doug Lindy, they set like health safety was paramount, and they you know, that was through the lens that we used, and we wanted to take a consistent approach across the entire you know, portfolio. So, you know, thousands of signs were, you know, protocols around signage and you know, air and water safety, and you know, just capacity, working out the capacity issues with on elevators. You know, we partnered with Dr. Joe Allen, you know, out of Harvard, and out of, you know, and you know, he was an advisor through that whole process of creating that plan. And we're actually in the process of doing a 2.0 version now, as we kind of enter another phase. So.
Great. Actually, let me wind back a little bit. You brought up an interesting challenge that we were dealing with, or we were confronted with in the early days. Not obviously by you so much, but I think for a lot of owners, there was a significant adjustment in dealing with the whole notion of working from home. You know, you're in the business of owning these buildings and making them available for people to come stay in them. Then all of a sudden, one day you've got to operate them remotely. I am interested a little bit because we ended up having a lot of folks that a lot of owners that were not prepared for that, and came up with various solutions. What operational challenges what specific operational challenge did you face, and how did you address them in the early days?
Yeah, so it was really, I mean, you know, I look back, Carl, I think you and I might have joked about this too, is you know, we made all these investments back in, you know, 18 and 19, that never had business resiliency as part of the business case, but wound up when we actually were confronted with this challenge of, you know, remote work. You know, I mean, I don't know how we would have done it without it, right? So the ability to have remote access, you know, we do run we run a converged network here. So again, the ability to get to resources, control them, whether it be on the building end or, you know, be on the enterprise end. And obviously with the move to the cloud, and, you know, just you know, I'll borrow a reference I use all the time from Robert Enton at Vornado, the evaporation of the cloud. So we've all been in this evaporation to the cloud, and all of that came together to really enable a pretty seamless you know, transition. And again, looking back, you know, business resiliency wasn't really part of the business case, but it wound up, you know, fundamentally enabling. If this event had happened a year earlier, okay, I would have had a little more challenge, but we were relatively seamless. So,
how do you keep the business going in an uncertain time? What was it that you did? And this might not actually be the technology team, but what did you have to do in terms of communicating with, as you call them, your customers? I mean, these are the people that are still writing you checks to not occupy the space. And what was
yeah.
what did you do there?
Yeah. So, you know, obviously I referred to, you know, this health safety plan that we published on May 1st. And, you know, the way you know, the other thing, well, let's talk about what we implemented. You know,
Sure.
we went through, it's really a series of measures and protocols. And you think about, you know, I come to work, I walk through public space, I go through, you know, an owner or landlord controlled space, and then I enter my employee workplace, right? And you and I have talked about this. You know,
The
you move
barrier,
through
yeah,
space,
yeah. Yeah.
and in our case as a multi-tenant office owner, you know, we had to get people safely and traverse that space that we control, right? So whether it be through a lobby, through into an elevator, through common areas, into common services like bathrooms, you know, all of that. And so we, you know, again, we thoughtfully kind of put those in place, and then dealt with, air quality and water quality protocols. We brought in touchless technology. We looked at, how we our access control and our analytics around to kind of have a pulse and measurement. But it was really the series of these measures and protocols that, elevate a level of trust. So I've been in the office since early June. I I walk through a public space. I walk through and I come into my employee workplace, when I come in, and our program takes over once I'm in our space. And I'm, I feel confident. I feel safe. Last week was the first week I was here 5 days for a row. I'll be here 5 days again this week. And I'm interacting with people in the office. I had a meeting with one of my senior people today in a large conference room, but we sat across from each other and interacted in a way that I probably couldn't necessarily do in a virtual way.
Yeah,
So
like we are here.
yes, yeah,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
tough. It's tough for me to go right on my wall and have that interaction of a
The
whiteboard.
collaboration. I mean, these white walls behind me. I've got these marker. But yeah, I'm in an open space, innovation lab that we created here, and they're empty, Carl.
Yeah.
No brainstorming is going on in this room right now, other than other than you and I talking, right? So, right. So.
Yeah, actually, so I think that for me as well, I don't know if it was beginning of June, but we started going back to the office about that same time, and it was really staged and phased. But in our case, the communication was not quite as good. We didn't really know, what was going on. They were still coming up with protocols for reentry, and of course, as an essential business, we had a lot of engineers and operations people that needed access to our labs and things like that, which proved to be challenging for us to navigate back in those days. And so this kind of leads to, and today I'm actually going on my first business trip since March. So
you're going to get on a plane today?
I'm
Plane
actually
later
going to
today?
get on a
Yeah.
plane and for business, and I'm going to go actually shake hands and meet customers in another city, and I think that's also interesting unto itself. Just a whole, the way different parts of the country are reacting to the pandemic. But if we dial the clock back a little bit to 9/11, all right. So there were a number of security measures introduced back then that have now endured and become essentially a normal part of our commercial office landscape. There are plenty of people, and I've even had that conversation as recently as yesterday, which is, this will be over pretty soon, and everything will go back to normal. Whatever, as your term, the next normal is, whatever that next normal might be. What of some of these strategies that you've deployed are have the real potential to endure well beyond what we're experiencing today, where there's still risk, there are still concerns about infection and people getting sick?
Yeah, no, it's good, very good question. So, I know, we had a couple of themes that were pre-COVID that were, active in our environment, active in commercial real estate, wellness and health was a theme. Data was a theme, engagement was a theme. You look at how the lens of COVID and our response has either accelerated, elevated the emphasis on certain themes. And again, I think health and wellness, which was already prevalent, is going to be obviously front and center. And there are technologies to deal with the the challenge of the virus, but you have post that benefits that come out of better air quality, right? And it was already part of any new development you're doing, even retrofitting older developments or changing out HVAC systems were already. So all of that is I personally is going to be a major theme going forward. And I do believe like touchless, which was already, was already kind of a theme in whether it was access control, whether it was, mobile enablement, is going to also be a theme that will be accelerated here. and be with us to stay. So I do. There's a couple of just to pick out two that are and it'll be a continuous journey. Again, you have uh, uh, investment cycles that you're going to have to deal with for how you bring in and enhance these type of items over the life cycle of an asset. But I personally think they're going to be a major component of and a lens for how you look at certain investments.
That's a good point. I think air quality, indoor air quality, and understanding essentially uh, the health of the environment is you're absolutely right. We hear that more and more. No matter where we go, no matter what market we're working in right now, that is becoming a key differentiator that many owners want to be able to put out there
Mm-hmm.
for their tenants. They want to be able to differentiate themselves with that. If we move, so you've been in the office since June. I think, I don't know, I'd have to go back and remind myself, look at my, we track it all. So there's somebody who's been tracking me as I go back to the office every day. But as we move ahead a little bit in time into, let's say, the June timeframe, when we started seeing some spikes, maybe not a second wave per se, but spikes, there was then there was then a little bit of a shift among, I think we were saying, hey, we'll be back in the office by maybe June or July. Then in June, we started hearing statements from, from Jack Dorsey at Twitter or Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook saying, hey, you know what, maybe we don't need to return. Some rather surprising, especially for those of us who are in the technology world. I'm just trying to understand, how do we do what we talked about earlier, which was collaborate, but okay, fine. But how are we going to get, this staged return came up. And so I guess my questions really are about what have we learned about, and now we're talking about, then we started talking about Labor Day, now we're talking about New Year. We have some of our enterprise customers that are saying it's going to be, Q2 of 2021. What have we learned about the dynamics of these employers and their employees with respect to the workplace? What are we, what is it that they're looking for, and how can we better address their needs?
Yeah. So I'll comment just about some of the dynamics. Is what what we saw is, obviously every market that we're in opened at different stages, and California is even in a different phase, remains in a different phase, right? And they had, then they had the fires to deal with. I mean, so all different dynamics. So
just hold on, because we may yet have an earthquake or some other, something else.
No, it's just I mean, that the fires were horrific. It's just so what we saw is, at each opening, you saw really, like New York and Boston, I'll stick with those two, really peaking in late July into early August, and then kind of going pretty sideways because it's a holiday, it's a summer month.
Yeah, sure.
And then after Labor Day, we have seen week over week increases, both in these markets. And I think the other interesting statistic that we've really looked at is not just the number of people on any given day, Carl, but if you look at the entire week, or you look at the entire month, how many people have actually come back in at least one day, if not 2 days or 3 days, right? So it's a larger number than this just saying, oh, occupancy is at 8% or 12%. It's really actually a larger number, closer to like 20% of people coming back in when you take the unique people over a longer period of time. Yeah, so you do have people coming back into the office. And the other thing that we've has also occurred is we've learned more about COVID, and what's important. So the basics of wearing a mask, and doing that as you traverse space. And the idea that if I go into a grocery store, I'm interacting with a lot more people than if I come into an office that's a 25 to 50% occupancy, and doing work. So we have been, as a company, I personally think we're going to see a continued incremental growth as people figure this out, I mean, I do think people kind of punted on the summer, and you do have you do have kind of an awareness, a rising awareness of the loss of what you get out of an office. And
Absolutely,
again,
productivity.
I do think we're going
Yeah.
to see continued increases here. So
And I wonder if part of what you're seeing is that there is a growing appreciation for the value of the office. Is that, do you have any data that would suggest that that's what people are?
I don't know if we have any data per se, but I just know that, I mean, I can anecdotally from my own team, when I have, we have people in the office, we are interacting, engaging, reconnecting in ways that we could never do over virtual interaction. And I just find that to be, it's a missing component. Even though everyone is working hard, we're not working as efficient and as effectively as a
Absolutely.
team.
But if you look at it, are you seeing, are public pronouncements going to be? Do you think that might be changing pretty soon as well? We saw certainly J.P. Morgan. Actually, I'll bring up an example. 2 weeks ago, telling traders get back to the office in New York. Do we think there's going to be? Do you think?
Well, I think again, some of this is going to be referencing companies that are figuring it out, right? And again, I look at our own journey. We had the benefit of this early kind of brain work around and figuring out, for our properties that just also flowed right into our space and our workplace program. So all of it was kind of gelled together, and so. So I've been here now, into my 4th month at work, and I can tell you, I feel safe. I feel, I have a level of trust, and I do think as you have more companies kind of getting reference points around. I mean, it's really interesting. I was on a call the other day, and 5 of us, was Boston Properties, another partner of ours. We're all in the office doing a Zoom call like this, and everyone was like, "You're all at the office?" Like, yeah, we're all back at the office, interacting and conducting our work. So again, I think I think there's going to be some acquired reference points, and I also think there's some fatigue about being home.
Absolutely.
I know, which is another element here, Carl.
I mean, Boston Properties has a variety of offerings, from more traditional long-term leases and your Flex by BXP program. What do you see in terms of on the demand side? Is there going to be a little bit more demand for non-traditional space?
Yeah. So I think that's still an unresolved kind of. I mean, it's being worked out by our companies. It's being worked out by what our offerings and aligning our offerings. So again, personally, my take on it is it's going to be. Again, we talk about the next normal. We are going to have to figure this out, and the demand and supply sides are going to have to kind of recalibrate. To what is actually needed, as again companies figure out how they're going to operate, how their use of space is going to. I mean, short term through the arc of this, and then secondly, longer term after, post it. So.
At the beginning of the year, we were both involved in a panel or in a conference where you spoke very passionately about the role of data. And how that is, how you see that, and this was in January, I believe, how you see that as being a key differentiator for you. And I would like to understand a little bit, probably there are a couple of different levels of questions. One is, what was, so taking the last 6 months out of the equation, what was sort of the driver behind your thinking there? Number two, how has embracing data helped drive that resiliency strategy for the company? And then finally, we can talk a little bit more about what are some of the new roles that probably have come to light in the last
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
last few months?
yeah. So I could riff on data all day long, right, Carl? Yeah, because we have a data journey that we've been on for 12 plus years, and I do see it as a competitive advantage of how we've architected ourselves and being able to be responsive. But in the context of that keynote that I gave back in January, I'm so excited about this decade, because you just have seen this, the data tools in the cloud, data at scale, moving on to ML and AI, all these capabilities that allow you to extend your enterprise, and an approachable set of tools that you can really use and leverage for insights and actionable insights. So that's what gets me excited, and I think not only for our own internal capabilities that we can take advantage of, but also each one of our vendors and partners like you and others who can leverage these tool sets for our benefit, right? I mean, I just it's really, I do think it's really going to be I mean, not the decade, next 5 years are just going to be a really change in that. So when you come back to our initial response, in March, we literally amped all our tool sets. It was amazing. So, our ability to look at, our collections and look at our retail and think about how do we really proactively deal with, look at the data, leverage the data for being proactive with all our retail customers, for example, as an example, right? The same thing on just understanding dynamics of our access control. I mean, prior to this, it was around space use and density. Well, now it's about a little bit the same, but in a COVID environment, and how space is being used on repopulation now. Is kind of another, and being able to also use it to alert our teams when density kind of immediately density is maybe hits a threshold in a lobby setting, for example. So that's so those have been kind of immediate examples that we've used, but moving forward, it's around, our, we've had a great case study in our sustainability strategy, and how do we take that the next level, leveraging these tool sets and our data lens at how we look at things, and take that to the next level. We've talked about ESG, and we've talked about health and wellness. Well, that, again, we're a multi-tenant office owner, but there's data that has to be shared between a customer and a
Absolutely.
landlord, that allows for mutual benefit, and that whole conversation, and that traditional boundary is one that we have to really think about going forward, and especially with health and wellness as part of a lens going forward. So
How do we shift the conversation so that people understand the mutual benefits
hmm
between
I
the
yeah.
occupier and the owner?
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be in the lens of ESG and health and wellness. I do think they're enablers of a conversation, and a facilitated conversation that has to happen between landlord and customer, to really think about what that looks like, um, so I do think whether it's a new development, a new building that you might be building, or layering in technology. I mean, again, if I I do think that those will be predominant lenses that enable this kind of breakdown of this traditional boundary, for lack of a better word, Carl.
What are some of the other just pure operational, sort of looping back to that point, what are some of the operational benefits that you see, maybe some, maybe some really simple ones, that when they talk to me about the cost, as everything gets reduced to dollars per square foot, and they said, hey,
Mhm.
if we can reduce or make it more efficient by 10, 20 cents a square foot a year,
Yes, yeah.
that may actually have a
Yeah, I'm
multi-million dollar.
incredibly intrigued, Carl, by the there's a couple of technologies that have just kind of like because of COVID are going to be like just kind of become mainstream. The QR code. Yeah, the QR code is like,
yes.
everyone knows how to use a QR code now, finally, right? And the other is, the other is sensors. I just,
Yeah.
the ability, and then to have, a mobile device or whatever that winds up being, and the ability to, use it for measure and data, use it for awareness, use it for presence. There's a number of things that become kind of tied and enabled for lots of different use cases and applications. So I'm excited that, again, and I talk about it as being elegant because it's simple, inexpensive, can be enabled quickly. And, again, it's coming back to that boundary of, we've got things that we control and our tenants, our customers control, and how do we navigate that? But again, very intrigued by that, right?
Going back to the initial discussion or the initial theme of this, which is about elevating trust. I think that it sounds to me like, and maybe you have some final comments about the role, and that's what we can end on is, how do you see the combination of technology and frankly just interpersonal interactions, how are they going to drive to elevate trust and bring us back to that next normal?
Yes, yeah. So yeah, it'll be, I guess I'll comment on two perspectives. One is, there's been a lot of our solution partners and providers like yourself, and Join, and that have, really gone kind of all in extending some COVID related, solutions, and it's again, as someone who sits and controls the common areas, and we have a lot of large customers, large companies taking large square footages, our role in how, we endorse, advocate, recommend solutions that they then take on has been, where they also own the data privacy really container, for their employees and their, where we don't. So we've kind of been very conscious and cautious around that at this point. We look at how we deal with common areas. We deal, obviously have utilities in the common space, but what's the appropriate level of technologies we need to overlay in this experience, and what's appropriate, what's practical, what's cost effective, in still achieving, this level of trust that I feel that we've achieved, right, without necessarily overlaying a lot of technology, right? So that's just one comment. And then the second comment is really, even, the post normal or the post next normal, whatever,
There's always a next normal, Jim. I think
normal,
that's what you're trying to tell me,
yeah.
right? There's always a next normal.
Yeah, but we're going to be, let's say there is a challenged environment, and I think landlords are going to have to think about, separate from health and wellness, how they position their assets competitively and differentiate their assets. And technology is going to have a major component you play in that area. And how do you enable to be a competitive asset or portfolio, asset to asset versus portfolio to portfolio. It'll be, I just find that'll be an interesting chapter, because it will be a little bit accelerated because maybe of some of the challenges that appear in the market.
So I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us and to speak to our audience.
Great, thanks. Yeah.
They will also have a chance to learn a lot about what's going on here.
Great, thank you.
So
Thank you, Carl. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.